when Congress writes a bill, it has consequences. And often those consequences aren't immediately known. The thing about it is the one big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump put out there, we know what the consequences are because you know what? It is quite evident and it is quite exposed. One of the consequences of this bill is that it's going to cut approximately 10 billion meals a year that normally goes to our poor folks who we have not made corporations paid them appropriately. So therefore, there are many people out there that are working, but still have to visit food banks. Why? Not because they're lazy, not because they don't want to work. They don't qualify for food stamps, so they have to go to food banks. But you know what? With the changes that they're talking about making to SNAP, the food stamp program, many of those people will have to use food banks going forward. And the food banks right now are receiving over 60% more visitors than they did 3 years ago. That just shows you the state that the country is in right now. The richest country in the world, the country that produces more food than it can use, it's a country that exports all the food. And the people in this country, a large plurality, are not making enough money to not keep them in a state of angst. And many having to either be on food stamps or going to food pantries. I want you to listen to this. I want you to listen to this leader of one of the big food distributors in Atlanta. Let him explain what we're going to go through, and then take a look at the map to see where this bill is going to affect people over the entire country and where most of that demand is going to be. Like I mentioned on my KPFT program this morning, there is a certain level of evil. There is a certain level of evil that you can have, that you have to write a bill where, in order to give tax breaks to a whole bunch of folks who make a lot of money that they don't deserve making because they've made it on these poor people that we're cutting. They're making their monies on these people's backs, but we are willing to cut more to pass that buck to the wealthy. There's a degree of evil, and we as Americans need to start seeing it the way it should be seen. What that budget is doing is evil. The writers are evil. You cannot be but evil to do what this bill is doing. I want you to listen to this, then we'll take it on the other side.
A new map from USA Today shows it could severely impact the poorest Americans. If that mega bill would pass, each highlighted state would have to pay at least $98 more a year for each person on food assistance to make up for the $267 billion that was slashed from the program. Food banks across the country are said to be terrified, saying it would create an unsolvable crisis as need skyrockets. In Atlanta, the community food bank says demand has jumped 60% in just the past 3 years. That's where we find my next guest, Kyle Wade, president and CEO of the Atlanta Community Food Bank, which serves more than 800,000 people across 29 counties in North Georgia. Kyle, first of all, thanks for being with us. What are you seeing right now in terms of food need?
Well, thanks for having me. And as you just said, demand for food assistance is as high as we've seen it in Metro Atlanta. That we know that the same is true for food banks all across the country. Lines are just getting longer and longer at food pantries. And as you mentioned, we're serving 60% more people today than we did just a few years ago. So demand is really high. And the last thing we need right now is to have a significant cut in programs to get resources to economically vulnerable families. That would put an extraordinary amount of additional pressure on food banks and other social programs that are serving those families.
Yeah, can you give us some specifics, for example? I mean, how would those cuts to SNAP, again, they now have to go to the Senate, but how could it impact your ability to serve? What would you do?
Well, look, in terms of the scale of what's being proposed, the net effect of the cuts that were included in the House bill would be the same as if we eliminated the entire food bank network in the country. That's the scope of what would be cut from assistance to families. We'd essentially eliminate all of the food bank activity that exists across the country.
I just want to make sure I understand you, because that's a shocking statement. Are you essentially saying if this goes through, every single food bank in America would have to double the amount of food, double the amount of people they serve potentially, just to meet the need to keep people from going hungry?
Yes, there are different estimates for what the bill would actually eliminate, but at least one estimate would suggest the equivalent of close to 10 billion meals a year in the amount of food that's provided to families. You know, it's $30 billion worth of food a year that's being proposed being cut from the SNAP program. And that's more than what food banks collectively distribute every single year. So we don't know if all of that demand would ultimately come to us, but we're talking about doubling or more our output to provide that same amount of food.
There are a number of people who, in arguing for this, believe that there's tons of waste, fraud, and abuse. They believe that there are people who could and should be working who are not. They give you a lot of reasons for why they think that these cuts are okay. You deal with this on a day-to-day basis. Is that your experience?
Well, it's certainly not our experience. The vast majority of people who receive support from food banks are families who are working. A lot of the increase in demand I referenced are among families who actually make too much money to even qualify for SNAP. And the folks who are on SNAP predominantly include families, households with children, senior households, disabled households. So the folks who can work are working in our experience. And if we were to remove a lot of those folks from the program through a variety of different proposed mechanisms in the bill, that would just result in more demand coming to food banks, a level of demand that is beyond what we really have the capacity to provide.
So absolutely good that there are a lot of people out there doing good work. But when you are fighting against an evil government, and I am using this word not sparingly now, but I'm using this word the way it needs to be used. The only way you can see the pain that this bill is having and will inflict on people is to call it out, to make sure that people understand that it is in fact an evil bill, to call out those folks who like to call themselves religious and evangelicals, to ask them, what would Jesus do? What would Muhammad do? What would all these other folks do if they did find out that a rich country decided to make those who have in their practice abuse others find a legal way to transfer their wealth upward, to continue what I call legalized theft on those who are antiseptically enslaved. This is a shame. This is, in fact, a shame.